All right, coming up, more narratives from the OTAs that we want to see or possibly want to see bucked come training camp for Big Blue. We break it all down, key names like rookie Wan'Dale Robinson, exciting linebacker Darrian Beavers, and of course, the question marks around returning from injury potential starter Shane Lemieux, right after the theme music. Yes, friends, it's OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where, of course, we are your hosts over here, Adam Armbrecht, also covering the Brooklyn Nets on the Locked On Nets podcast with my boy, Doug Norrie. There, you'll find Andy Makowitz, the season ticket holder, generational fan for Big Blue, healthy, wealthy, and wise on a Wednesday.
Yeah, Adam, you know what's crazy? Even though we're in between mini camp and training camp, I still got Giants on the brain. Every time I wake up, I think to you, what do we want to talk about today? And you know what? I bet you the OGP listeners are thinking the exact same thing.
Listen, buddy, we've got narratives that we want to track down. We did a bit of it on the previous episode. What do we think can carry over around key players who are maybe going to fall off here in training camp or hopefully confirm, like Daniel Bellinger, all of Andy Makowitz's hype machine that he's been pumping up here. The gasoline is being poured in the tank for Daniel Bellinger. Got to get it across the line. So when we say same way, fact or fiction, OTA hype to training camp proof, 3 more guys today. The first one we're going to dive in on here is somebody that I think obviously has been on New York Football Giants fans' minds for a very big reason from last year coming into this year. Lets you know that it's not going to be a rookie, and that is Shane Lemieux. You talked about him obviously this offseason. We've seen him playing at left guard. He's recovering from the injury. He's doing everything right. He seems to have the mentality and personality that this new regime wants across that front. Is Shane Lemieux getting some hype out of the OTAs, going to in training camp, confirm he's ready to be the starting left guard for the New York Football Giants, and that's what the anticipation should be for week 1?
Adam, it's like you're throwing me a trick question right out of the gate.
That's right.
Because my short answer is yes. I believe that
Next question.
Next question. Let's move on. I do believe Shane Lemieux will be the starting left guard week 1, but I think it's almost out of procedure. It's almost out of being in the building before, being a guy that is coming off an injury that has played in the NFL before. If you were to ask me who the week 6 starter is at left guard for the Giants, I would actually give you a different answer, and I believe that's going to be Joshua Ezeudu. But week 1, you're hearing all of the chatter from the media, the coaches. They're all building up Shane Lemieux. They don't, coaches like to hype their own players, but really does seem like Shane Lemieux's getting a ton of flowers early on in OTA and minicamp, which was one of the bigger surprises for me. But do you feel the same way that Shane Lemieux is going to be the starter week 1?
Probably. We're gonna get to we'll get to maybe to Josh Ezeudu.
You said that one with your chest out. You said that one really strong.
It's just bravado. You know what because I agree with everything you're saying, and especially on the part of like, man, he's really been getting his flowers this offseason. But the thing that I do wonder about, and this isn't a knock on Shane Lemieux, we've talked about this before. We've gotten some flack from Giants fans before about this, but that like in theory, he's getting hyped up because he's doing everything right. But also maybe there's a little bit of that hype there because what you want to do is set the bar for anybody, Joshua Ezeudu or otherwise, to say, this is what you have to get to in training camp if you want to claim this spot, right? We have someone that we like, that we be comfortable with, that has, as you said, NFL experience. So I think the bar is being set at a fairly high threshold. And there's maybe only one guy right now in Ezeudu that you would say he can come in and take that job from Lemieux. So the competition is thin, but certainly stiff based on where they drafted Ezeudu. And I'll go back to previous regimes and just in general NFL terms. When you draft a player where they drafted Ezeudu, 67th overall, like you're right on that cusp of saying we have expectations of you coming in and being able to be a contributor early, which is why when you say, okay, so by week 6 it could be Ezeudu, right? The reason why I maybe disagree is that to me it would be saying, well, if Lemieux is doing well in camp and going into the season, how is he losing his job, right? And we know in the NFL, you don't lose your job just because there has to be a reason for it, lack of performance, or you'd have to have someone in behind you really shining. And I think from an offensive line perspective, that's probably one of the harder spots to break through on and take over on someone's job, because the reps in practice are not at the same value as in-game reps, right? Someone deeper on the depth chart at another position can show off for a handful of reps in-game, and then it starts to happen over the week of practice. Maybe, do you think that Ezeudu will get some in-game reps from weeks 1 through 5 during the regular season to showcase what he can do? Maybe that's an interesting follow-up.
Well, I probably I'm kind of going to go the
Nice.
same route that you did
Yeah.
because you're really putting me on the spot with the question that you had.
Perfect.
Listen, we get beat up from listeners quite a bit on Shane Lemieux because a lot of people come out and say, our argument is I saw enough of him in 2020 where I thought he was better than Will Hernandez, but yet he had a pass blocking Pro Football Focus grade of 16.9, which is just like you said, an SAT score. Just standing there alone gets you 15 points, right? Like, so you would get 15 points as a left guard. So when you think about that, he gave up 5 sacks. He was a sieve during pass blocking, and that was the one thing we wanted to see cleaned up. And off of 11 pass block attempts before he got hurt, he had a grade of 81.5 in week 1 of last year. And most people are pointing to that as the reason to have all of this hope. And it's like, well, you have the whole 2020 season, which was abysmal. Then you have 11 pass snaps, which he improved upon and then got hurt. Is it Jekyll or is it Hyde? I think he's gotten better with maturity and being in the league longer, but I don't think it's going to be as amplified as, say, the 11 snaps would show. And so the question really is, knowing that the previous regime under Jason Garrett and Joe Judge wanted to have a conservative run first short, whatever program,
Right.
Shane Lemieux seemed to have a better situation and a spot in there. Knowing the creativity that Brian Dable and Mike Kafka want to have with some of these short passes and how they want to work things through the passing game, it's really going to shine a spotlight of whether or not Shane Lemieux has improved over what you saw was a larger sample size in 2020.
Yeah, and I think it's so funny, man. The last thing there is a little bit of shell shock of the idea, right? Of this is coming from a previous regime, one that we all universally agree is terrible, right? And made so many mistakes, and yet we're gonna pluck out this fifth round guy and say that he's capable of it. And it's not I think he can be, but to your point, it's like, will this new system overexpose him in some of the flexibility you need to have and the versatility across the line, or will the quick up tempo pace of it allow you to hide some of the deficiencies of Shane Lemieux or anybody across the line? It leaves a lot of questions to be answered. I think we're relatively in the same boat. I wouldn't be shocked if he is still the starter come week 1 or is labeled the starter week 1. But my vote is, again, new regime, turning it over. I'd like to see, through earning it, Joshua Ezeudu be the starting left guard come week 1. I don't know if it's terribly likely. All right. Fact or fiction, OTA hype, or training camp proof? One Mr. Darrian Beavers. This is obviously my darling from the draft. I'm a big fan of him. I think he has the right versatility and the skill set to fit inside of Wink Martindale's scheme. Didn't hear a lot out of OTAs about Darrian Beavers. He's obviously a later round draft pick, so there's a little bit of that learning curve potentially for players further back in the draft and getting up to speed and up to tempo. Do you think that in training camp we're going to start to hear, yeah, Darrian Beavers? We see him a little bit on the interior for the defensive linebacking core. Hey, Darrian Beavers, we saw him out on the edge a little bit in some sub packages. Hey, did you notice how Darrian Beavers broke up that pass play, dropping back into coverage? Do you expect to hear his name really start to get talked about more and more when training camp gets underway?
Well, you're driving the bus on the Darien Beavers bandwagon because I know for a fact that in
Driving
the
the truck.
draft you came out and you said this was the steal for the Giants. They got him so late. A lot of people had him going 2 or 3 rounds earlier. His size is great at 6'4", 250. He runs a 4.7. Luke Fickle was just out. His head coach in college came out and basically said he can do it all. Like, he's really good in pass protection. But also in pass protection, if a guy gets a ball, he can lay the boom and lay the thump. And so, Luke Fickle was saying all these great things about Darien Beavers. The problem, Adam, is that he hasn't played for Cincinnati in 6 to 9 months, right? And so, like, Luke Fickle being the only one that's saying Darien Beavers is doing anything worth consideration is actually a concern for me, because you hear in OTAs and minicamp, every single media person kind of knows their job. and says, look at Cordell Flott breaking up that pass. Can you believe Dane Belton getting 2 sacks in a row? Look at Evan Neal being strong as ever at the right tackle position. And it's like, was Darrian Beavers there? Was he in a red jersey? Was he training with the trainers in the back? I literally didn't see anything. Like, if you search Darrian Beaver news articles on Google, there isn't one with like, and he really showed up and established himself in XYZ position. So for me, that's a little bit of a concern, knowing that the media and the coaches have this little song and dance that they do together, where it's like, we either need to pump up people, or we need to make sure to give us someone a little tough love. I just haven't heard anything on Darrian Beavers.
Yeah, and I mean, you could throw in like when you're hearing a little things about Quincy Roche, right? He's getting a little bit of hype here, but McFadden didn't get any, and we're going to talk about him too, right? He didn't get any kind of noise in camp. I think it's interesting. Again, it ties back to when we talk about guys like Shane Lemieux or different players. When you hear the buzz around a guy, and again, media hype, right? Is it building somebody up regardless of what's happening or not happening in camps, or is it a reality of the sample size that you're getting there? And again, I think when you're looking at the defensive side of the ball and we're talking about, Azeez Ojulari coming back in his second year. God, look how good this kid looks. Thibodeau, that's the sexy pick coming out of the draft on the defensive front. Dexter Lawrence, where is he lining up, right? What is Leonard Williams' new role going to be? There's probably, and then let alone these conversations around Blake Martinez. And, now we're hearing a lot of the dialogue around expectations for him. And if he's going to be healthy, what can he do for Wink, let alone the transition of Tay Crowder, starters, right? All these guys. And then you get into, the Carter Coughlins of the world, the Cam Browns, Ellerson Smith's name now bubbling up. So in that regard, now I just listed 9 guys that got mentioned in some form or fashion in the news cycle before Darrian Beavers did. So maybe there is a reason to have a little bit of pause on it, but in mentioning all of those names, I'm going to come back to and say, when I look at his skill set and what I think he's capable of, I look at the depth chart and go, well, I don't even know if Oshane Ximines is going to be a part of this roster. And then you get into the Ellerson Smith or the Fox scenario. Carter Coughlin, I love him. Is he really destined for special teams greatness at this point of his career? McFadden's going to develop. Is Blake Martinez going to be healthy? Like, Tay Crowder, what is the ultimate role for him? Justin Hilliard, about to get suspended for 2 weeks to start the year, right? Like, there's clearly an opportunity here for Darrian Beavers to get the reps. And at the very least, and we're asking, I made it as a factual statement because I believe he's going to prove it. But at the very least, the reps are going to be there for Darrian Beavers in training camp, right? So much like we got a little bit of buzz around an Ellerson Smith and him coming back here off that injury and saying, hey, chance for him to reset that kind of table for himself. I think Darrian Beavers is going to have the chance to come out and say, in starting reps, right, with Azeez Ojulari and Thibodeau. And if he looks good there, and if Ellerson Smith looks good there, right, if these guys start to look good there, that's how you shift where you are in the depth chart and where the expectations go. It's going to take time, though. And he'll probably be one that I earmark and say, if I don't hear some buzz in training camp, a little ping is going to go off in the back of my mind. And it could just be, is this a guy that midway through the season, we start to really see the evolution of his game, right? Later round pick. There's a lot of guys like that. Do I need to, I'll put it that way. Do I need to temper my expectations around how quickly he can be a contributor for this team?
Well, I don't know if
In
your
your opinion.
expectations, I don't know if your expectations are off. And I'm going to turn a question back to you because, like I said, you drive the bus, and I think the listeners want to hear more from you on this one.
Yeah.
Here's the question that I have that comes to mind with Beavers. Do you think maybe he fell in the draft? And do you think maybe we haven't heard anything from him yet? Because they don't necessarily know what position on the defense he is going to play. Because Adam, I'm just gonna say really quickly, NFL Draft Buzz, who does a great write up, very simple. It's like the cliff notes of any draft player. If you want to go check it out, they have him listed as a linebacker / edge rusher. Then you have Luke Fickell coming out saying he's really good in pass protection, like in pass
Coverage,
defense,
yeah.
but pass coverage. And then you have Luke Fickell saying, but no, he could bring the boom and he brings the thump. It's like, okay, so like what position does he play? And if he's playing edge rusher or outside linebacker, he's behind Azeez Ojulari, Kayvon Thibodeau, Quincy Roche, and Ellerson Smith, who have all been showing up. And if he's playing inside, he's still behind Blake Martinez, Tay Crowder, Cam Brown, Carter Coughlin, Justin Hill, all the guys that you just mentioned. So like, do you think we talk about loving position versatility? Do you think it's that Beavers may not have like an official designation that we haven't heard from him yet?
It's a really good point, and I don't think it's necessarily a negative because that's the way that I looked at him coming out of saying. Remember, I said he's like a little hair light on being fast enough to be called a sideline to sideline linebacker, but he can
Right.
get the job done in a lot of spots, right? He's not. Listen, you're not going to send him out there against a wide receiver, but he'll pick up a tight end in coverage. He can get after that running back coming out of the backfield. So position versatility, I think if we want to paint a positive picture, is that over OTAs, he's dabbling, right? He's looking at all these different spots, as is Wink Martindale, and saying, well, I can use you in a lot of different ways. And the best thing that we can do is start to have you get your feet wet in every single spot. And that may slow down, but the timeline for knowing what his defined role is going to be. And that may be sub package guy at multiple positions. But we may just not see that emerge until we're halfway through training camp and say, okay, when those reps come, Thibodeau, Aziz, then it's Ellerson Smith. Now, Roche, who's not a fast, particularly quick player coming off the edge, maybe that's where he starts to see a little bit of value, right? So, and then you look on the interior as well and you say, okay, what about when we want to be a little bit bigger on the inside linebacker role? What about when it's a tight end matchup that maybe Blake Martinez isn't going to be able to get there on and make sure we have sound coverage? All of a sudden, you see a percentage of reps come in there as well. I still believe by the end of this camp, he's going to have a very defined role in I think week 1, he's going to be on the field, but I'm not going to be disappointed if it's a small sample size and it takes half a season for him to get there, which is me starting to temper my expectations. Cause what I don't want to do is start to get down on a guy that hasn't even had the opportunity to build a baseline for success.
I'll say it's fiction in terms of him emerging, but I think there will be an established role, Adam, and his established
Yeah.
role is going to be in a pinch. Can you fill in at all of the linebacker positions? You're a
Yeah.
sixth round pick for a reason. We have established veterans. We have first round picks that are in front of you. Can in a pinch you spell Blake Martinez if he gets hurt, or give Quincy Roche a blow from that one side? Like I think that being a sixth round pick, it's okay to not have a defined position week
Right.
1, right? Like you're coming in as a late round pick, not much is expected of you. If he can carve out a role that says, I can help at any of these positions should we need it, I really think that's a good spot for Darrian Beavers to be going into the season.
Fact or fiction, OTA hype or training camp proof? This is the juicy one, Andy. Wan'Dale Robinson poised to disappoint. Second time this offseason where there has been a report that came out, second time from Bleacher Report, naming the top players for the upcoming season that could disappoint. Wan'Dale Robinson is atop of that list. Now, here is the passage from Bleacher Report on it. Galladay, Shepard, Tony, and Darius Slayton all figure to be ahead of Robinson on the depth chart at wide receiver. I disagree with the initial thesis already. Furthermore, running back Saquon Barkley expects to take a sizable role as a pass catcher. I believe in that. And that's per CBS's Josina Anderson underneath this Bleacher Report. Big Blue may entertain trade offers on Tony and Slayton, according to the Athletics' Dan Dugan, just name dropping left, right, and center. But
Wow.
even if the Giants deal one of them, Robinson would probably go into the regular season as the number 4 wideout at best. At 5'8", 185, Robinson will likely line up in the slot and handle some ball carrying duties, but he seems primed for a role as more of a gadget player than consistent threat in the passing game. I'm going to go on just on the back end of this here quickly. If Tony and Slayton are potentially getting traded, I have no clue how you could be sitting here saying that Wan'Dale Robinson would be the 4th wide receiver at best. How, what do we, so that just boggled my mind to start right there, Andy. But I mean, just in totality, I'm not saying that, and you talked about where's the expectation bar going to be for Wan'Dale Robinson. I think it's reasonable to wonder just about this system. And again, a lot of these themes we're talking about is how long will it take? And I don't think about skill set for Wan'Dale Robinson. This is more about just for the offense to find its rhythm and where they want to go and utilize guys and balance that scheme. But it seems nuts to me, given what the wide receiving core is for the New York Football Giants, that Wan'Dale Robinson is being looked at as, I don't even know, man, buried on the depth chart. Good luck. Like I'm a little bit surprised by that.
So this is bizarre to me. Honestly, like the idea that he's going to disappoint. One, he's a rookie. Two, you have him as of right now ranked as the 5th wide receiver, right? So like,
Yeah.
uh, it doesn't make sense to me. What are the expectations that you're levying on Wan'Dale Robinson to say that he's going to be a disappointment? That's the first thing that kind of baffles me. The second is, I don't know if you've read a report because I haven't read a report. Is Sterling Shepard going to be the starting slot receiver week one? Is is he going to be healthy coming off of a season-ending leg injury that
Yeah.
had him re-up for less money with the Giants so that he could rehab his knee? Like, am I missing something? In all honesty, like, have you seen Sterling Shepard will be out there for preseason games playing? Like, because I certainly have not seen that.
That's what and then that's like even just before we even talk about Wan'Dale Robinson, the player and the skill set and what I think he's capable of. You look inside the wide receiver room, you're talking about a guy in Darius Slayton that may or may not be on this roster. And at best, you like that's first thing. Darius Slayton is the fourth wide receiver already on this roster. And that's not even a knock on Darius Slayton. You drafted Wan'Dale Robinson in the second round in a new regime. Darius Slayton is a fifth round pick from a holdover from a previous GM. That's it. Like Wan'Dale Robinson's already the third wide receiver on this list behind Kenny Galladay, Kadarius Toney. Then it's Wan'Dale Robinson. To your point about Sterling Shepard, I love Sterling Shepard. I'd love him to be able to be on this team and be a contributor. We have no clue if he's going to be healthy enough to start the season, let alone long term. And we know he's already a guy that is going to be north of 30 here. Like combined with injuries, the wide receiver tends to get diminished there. And when you see a team that obviously has a position versatile player in terms of where you line him up in Kadarius Toney, but when you go out and draft another quick twitchy first roll slot wide receiver in the draft in the second round, like there's a reason for that. There's an expectation there. That's what baffles my mind here. And I know I'm not going to get into like overly get into the value of it. Of while I think Kenny Galladay can still be a contributor and can be a quality player, I'm not setting the bar that Kenny Galladay has to be the elite, even number 2 wide receiver on this roster. And maybe that's a part of this is like positionless basketball in the NBA. There need not be a hierarchy. Obviously, Kadarius Toney is going to get labeled as the number 1 healthy on the field. We talked about him last time, but it just needs to be value. That's what these wide receivers all need to be doing. And just from that standpoint, I don't know how you can sit here and go, a guy that potentially is going to line up in the backfield and take some reps out of the running back position can also line up back there and then catch the ball in the same role you're talking about exploding here underneath Kafka for Saquon Barkley, and he can line up in the slot and do things as a pure wide receiver. I don't know how you can say he's going to disappoint. Like, what's the benchmark then? Why am I getting so fired up about this?
Because you're thinking the same thing. Like, I'm not even talking about Wan'Dale Robinson, the skill set, because I don't think anyone's. I mean, they said he's diminutive in size and all that different stuff, but like, let me give you an example of why this is so crazy. Tyquan Thornton out of Baylor was a wide receiver that was selected 7 picks behind Wan'Dale Robinson, and he went to the New England Patriots, where they are clearly a team that is devoid of talent in the wide receiver room. They have been searching for wide receivers for years. He is ranked as the 4th or probably 5th wide receiver on their depth chart. Why is no one saying anything about Tyquan Thornton? Why are they not saying that he's poised to be a disappointment as a second round pick? Why? Because he's the 4th or 5th ranked wide receiver and the expectations aren't that great. This is my point at the beginning of the article. Who is levying these expectations on Wan'Dale Robinson that he should have 10 touchdowns and 1,000 yards in a crowded room where there are other guys that have similar skill sets that are almost as talented as Wan'Dale? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me.
And by the way, if we're just talking about this article that we're bringing this in from, this came out off of Giants Wire. It's care of Dane Benton, who at the end of his article of this little blurb says, Robinson may have been overdrafted in the eyes of many, but this growing notion that he's going to disappoint as a rookie seems entirely unfounded, right? So, and I think that just feeds right into your premise there of what is the bar of expectations that you're setting? And also, you said it too, set to disappoint. Well, if you want 1,000 yards out of the kid and 90 plus receptions, okay, he's probably going to come up short of
Right.
that. But we talked about it early in the offseason. If I told you that you're going to see 60 catches from Wan'Dale Robinson, and I'm not even saying whether that's high, low, and different, and 700 yards, right? We asked the over/under question there. Like, that is a successful rookie season for Wan'Dale Robinson. And I think that to me, the baseline is saying this kid's going to give you 700 yards this year. However, it gets fostered, all purpose yards. That's the baseline. And we'll see. And that's more than enough. That's a massively successful year for him because it means that he's contributing in his role along with Kadarius Toney and with Saquon Barkley and with Kenny Galladay and with Daniel Bellinger, right? So like maybe that's a big part of it too here is sometimes, and we've talked about this, the hype and coverage. So OTAs has a good rapport with Daniel Jones. He's showing up. You're getting a lot of buzz around him. Now, I think that those are the little breadcrumbs that you follow the trail and say, this kid's going to be ready. He's going to be ready to have his role for this team. And maybe those breadcrumbs for some made them go, all right, I'm going to take a second round draft pick and the fact that he's getting talked about a bit here and say, you now need to be a 1A on this roster and 1,000-yard receiver in your rookie campaign. Yeah, you want to set that bar. People are going to fall short of that. But and by the way, he's not poised to disappoint. He's poised to, I think he's actually poised to exceed expectations, understanding where he was drafted, what his skill set is, and where this offense and this team is as a whole.
The simple answer is if you're talking about fantasy football, sure, there's a
Yeah.
lot of mouths to feed. Like, yes, will you not see it on the stat sheet? But going into the season, there's question marks about Darius Slayton being on the roster. If Sterling Shepard's going to be healthy week one, Kadarius Toney's coming off a knee procedure, is wearing a red jersey. We don't know what we're getting from him, and Kenny Galladay has been oft injured in his career. So for me, there is all the opportunity ahead of Wan'Dale Robinson, especially in the system that he's going to be playing in. I don't understand it. Maybe it's a fantasy football thing. I really can't get behind it, Adam.
Yeah. Anyway, so that one really pissed me off in a lot of different ways. And again, I'll leave you with this too, as Benton mentioned as well. He's going to get reps. The positional versatility that Wan'Dale Robinson lends for you is going to get him a lot of reps. So volume, unlike when we talk about how can you make an impact if you are a Darrian Beavers or if you are, a player somewhere in this mix here. Same thing for Daniel Bellinger, right? Well, if he ends up being the starter week one, the reps are going to dictate how much quote unquote production he can give for you. So we know that today was a day for me. Darrian Beavers, I'm still driving that bus. I think he'll get there in the end. I was big on Wan'Dale Robinson when they drafted him. I think he's going to come through. I know that Andy's going to buy the jersey. I'll say week three. Week three, I think Wan'Dale Robinson is in the closet for Andrew Makowitz to be celebrating on Sundays. Other than that, though, friends, you can get the podcast wherever you get those needs fulfilled. You can get after us over on YouTube, obviously. Get into the comments, have the conversations. We're going to keep rolling through a lot of these guys. And then as we get closer to training camp and into training camp, it'll be time to say, what are the stat lines going to be going into this season? Where do we think they can get some wins along the way? And I mean from a roster standpoint, not wins and losses, but there's a lot to break down over the course of this offseason. And apparently some of this stuff, Andy, is going to piss me off. At the end of the day, do you feel like we're trending towards a positive training camp for the New York Football Giants? Are we going to continue to have this sense of renewal here under Joe Shane and under Brian Dable? We get to say, results, record be damned. The results and the effort and the energy of this franchise is going to continue to build towards this regular season.
Yes, at the end of the day, I think the easy answer is you like the energy that you're hearing coming out of OTAs and training camp. There are still question marks around guys like Kadarius Toney and others, but as a whole, if you're a Giants fan, you have to be encouraged with what you have heard so far and have to be excited about training camp and seeing some of these guys perform in the preseason games.
You know it. We'll catch you next time. And until that next time, as Andy Makowitz would want, need, and nay, demand that people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.